All right. Well, hello, everyone. I wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar on Manufacturing Industry Outlook, Navigating the Challenges and Opportunities in 2024 and Beyond. My name is Tara Thomason. I'm an LM Fellow with Lockheed Martin Aeronautics, and I'm a member of the SME Members Council as well. I'm thrilled to be here with you today, and as we explore the future of our industry and manufacturing. Over the next hour, we're going to delve into this topic and understand the future of manufacturing in the industry. We have a great expert panel. I'm really excited to hear their insights. Hopefully you are as well, and really see where they sit on thinking about the strategies and where they think we ought to navigate this evolving landscape in manufacturing. So as you know, hopefully you've seen a lot of the emails coming out from our awesome communications team in SME. It is Member Appreciation Week. They've done so much to celebrate us. I know I've appreciated it. They've got some great content, great videos that have come out celebrating the remarkable contributions so many of you have brought to us. It's a week, they've had some great savings promotions that they've brought to us. I know Lenovo computer laptops was one of them I noticed. They've had great surprises and unique opportunities they bring to us. So please enjoy it. Let them know what you've liked. They'll really appreciate your feedback. Some quick housekeeping. Excuse me, before we begin, all of the attendees are going to be muted today to minimize any background noise as normal. Please use our chat feature throughout the program. If you have any questions, we'll try to capture those at the end. I definitely want to get your questions. And then, of course, this event is being recorded and a replay is going to be posted on the SME Connect website. For any post-event questions, email the membership team at membership@sme.org. Okay, and we're going to do a quick introduction. So myself, again, I am Tara Thomason. I'm a technical fellow with Lockheed Martin Aeronautics, and I'm a member of the Members Council. My background is in advanced materials processing and manufacturing technology strategy. I basically look at the challenges across our production floors and tackle them to try and make us more efficient and make us more lean. So I'll pass it on to Chris Chizik.
Awesome, thank you so much. Give me 1 second while I share my screen. Let's get started. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining. I am Chris Chizik with the Association for Manufacturing Technology. Back to my screen. There we go. With the Association for Manufacturing Technology. And just quick background, if you don't know who AMT is, we were founded back in 1902 as the National Machine Tool Builders Association. So since then, we've been collecting data on machinery sales, working with our members as well as their customers to advance manufacturing in the US. And if you haven't heard of AMT, I'm pretty sure you've heard of IMTS, which is our big trade show every 2 years in Chicago's McCormick Place. It just wrapped up about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. This month is flying by, but it was a huge success this year. It was about 1.2 million square feet of booth space. Just over 89,000 people passed by, and we got great feedback throughout. The energy was just very good. I kind of referred to it halfway through jokingly and then a little bit seriously as kind of like the Disneyland of manufacturing. It was a great event. If you weren't able to be there, hopefully we'll see you there in 2026. But now that you have that little background, let me move on to what's happening with the economy. Now, I think the biggest story right now of what's happening in the economy is kind of question, did we avoid a recession? The Fed has started to reduce interest rates, And I really like this cartoon because it really captures that kind of hesitation of not knowing where we're at, what's around the corner. And if you look closely, it's from the summer of 2022. Now, we have gone down in interest rates since then, but I think it's still appropriate because we don't really know if that bear on the cliff has come closer, moved farther away, or where it really is. And the interesting part is since that cartoon came out, there have been 8 straight quarters of GDP growth. Despite the hesitation from everybody, a lot of people thinking, a recession is around the corner, there have been 8 straight quarters of growth. Now, a lot of those quarters have been below the long-term US growth trends, but I would argue that they're still positive. And this was after the early 2022 technical recession. So it's called a technical recession because while there were 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, all of the other indicators, such as employment was going up, industrial production was going up, consumer spending remained high. A lot of the negative impacts were actually from drawdowns in inventories. So although a lot of people call it a technical recession, I kind of like to say it's an accounting recession, just because of the way that we count things. But like I said, since then, there have been 8 straight quarters of growth. And looking forward about where GDP is likely to end up at the end of 2024, first we can take a look at the Federal Reserve. Last Wednesday, they put out their summary of economic projections, and their median consensus was 2% growth in 2024. It's down ever so slightly from their previous 2 projections, but still well in positive territory. Oxford Economics puts the growth rate at 2.6%, a little bit higher than the Fed, but they are also coming down a little bit from their previous estimates. Oxford tends to be a little bit more on the optimistic side, so I also like to put in ITR Economics, who tends to be a little bit more pessimistic. They put growth at 1.1% for the year, and that was back in April. Now, with all this growth, we have to take a look at where this is coming from. And the biggest sector in the US economy and the biggest contributor to GDP is consumer spending. Now, right here, I'm taking a look at just consumer spending on durable goods. Durable goods are those things that, if you kick, it hurts. They're the things that are made with the material or made with our members' machinery. Now, if you look at the light blue line, that is the pre-COVID trend. That was the trend of growth for consumer spending on durable goods. After the COVID recession, which is that second gray bar, consumer spending on durable goods just exploded. And if you really think about the way that consumers were behaving during that time, they really shifted their spending from services to goods. If you can't go to restaurants, you're going to invest in pots and pans and other cookware. If you can't go on vacations, you're going to invest in electronics, other at-home entertainment devices, and all of these things contributed to a massive spike in demand for manufactured goods. Now, what that did was, in addition to manufacturing, a whole bunch of other sectors were also having difficulty finding labor during this period. This is a graph of the ratio of open positions to unemployed workers. I like to put the entire economy on here because even though generally we look just at manufacturing, manufacturers don't just compete amongst themselves for employees. You're competing with every other industry that's available for workers. So that's why I like to look at the total ratio. Prior to COVID, we were a little bit higher, above that 1-to-1 ratio, where there were more jobs available than workers to fill them. After COVID, that went down dramatically as there were more and more people unemployed. That rapidly went back up, and for a while there were 2 positions for every available worker. And since then, it's come down pretty significantly. But it's worth noting why that came down. The first tranche of when it was coming down was largely due to open positions being filled. So people would come into the labor market and almost immediately get a job. So there were fewer and fewer jobs available. It wasn't as if, more and more people were being laid off and becoming unemployed. Now, recently, that trend has kind of shifted because it is going down because of a rising unemployment level. But again, it's important to note that it's not because a ton of people are being laid off. It's because more and more people are confident enough to enter the workforce. You're only really counted as unemployed if you're actively seeking work. And more people are getting comfortable with the labor market that they're coming back into the labor force. Now, all of that combined together, increased demand, super tight labor market, that naturally led to inflation and the Fed raising interest rates. And that's caused a lot of the hesitation in the economy that people are either waiting for rates to come down, prices to stabilize, and it's had a pretty dramatic effect on manufacturing. Now, before I get to the effect on manufacturing, I just want to specify, what am I talking about? I realized pretty quickly when I say manufacturing technology, everybody has a different view of what I'm talking about in their head. So basically what I'm talking about today is metalworking technology. Anything that cuts, folds, bends, or otherwise shapes metal into a final good or component in another good. If anybody was at IMTS the other week, you'll know exactly what I was talking about. Now, looking at machinery orders, we can see the normal fluctuations, but after COVID, it spiked massively, and it started to come down ever since. While some have characterized it as a decline, I think it's a lot more of a normalization because the orders after COVID were just incredibly high and sustained for a while. And while the order activity has declined slightly, it's still above its historic average. The other line on this chart, the light blue line, is capacity utilization, which is a pretty good indicator of when people are going to be buying machinery. Typically, when capacity utilization is above 80%, there's an increased demand for machinery. And it's been above 80% for quite some time now, almost 2 full years. And while this is the overall durable goods manufacturing environment, there are specific sectors that are well above the 80% mark. To get a little bit more holistic view of what is happening in the manufacturing market, I'd like to take a look at all three of our summaries. We have USMTO, which covers the machinery, the Cutting Tool Market Report, which covers the consumables that actually do the work on the metal, as well as our Work Holding Report, which covers the bit that holds the metal being worked on. Now, if we look at some typical patterns, we see that they generally move in tandem with one another. Every now and then there's an odd spike where machinery orders go up a lot more quickly than tooling or work holding. They tend to increase at about the same time, and then the machinery orders moderate, tooling and work holding continue to rise, and they peak about 2 quarters apart. Now, from 2017 to 2018, there was this anomalous spike in orders. And prior to COVID, this was a really anomalous event, the spike from 17 to late 18. However, if we look at the patterns after COVID, it was unprecedented. Machinery orders spiked massively, and the tooling and work holding didn't quite keep pace. Now, when I talk to non-manufacturing audiences, I like to say, remember that the machinery orders go up when people want to be making things. Tooling and work holding orders are going up when people are making things. And it was a little bit concerning that the machinery orders were going up so rapidly without actual production keeping pace. However, there's several reasons why it wasn't as concerning as other instances in this case. And just running through a few of them, 2 of them are generally focused on supply chain issues. First is just the normal lag between when the machinery is ordered and when it hits the shop floor. As those expanded during COVID, there was naturally more time between when you ordered a machine and when you need the tooling to use it. Secondly, non-machine supply issues. Say you have the machine, you have everything else you need on the floor. If a shipment of material such as steel or copper or aluminum doesn't come in time, you're going to not be making as much product or using as much tooling as typical. Secondly, on the same side of that coin is labor issues. If you have all of the materials you need, but you have one person running between 3 to 4 machines, it's not going to be as efficient as if you're fully staffed. So you're not going to be going through as much of the tooling or anything like that. And then finally is automation. While automation increases the value of a machine order, in a lot of cases, it can actually reduce the amount of tooling that's needed. Optimized tool paths reduce wear, decrease crashing, sensors stop the machine before things get too hot or start to fatigue. So a lot of that can contribute to using less and less tooling when the value of the machine goes up. So all of these combined somewhat account for that huge spike that we saw and explains why it didn't really result in as negative a consequence as it has in the past. Now, on the note of automation, we like to track it with the average order value. So the dark line is the average order value tracked by USMTO. Pretty simple calculation, dollar value over number of units. The light blue line is the producer price index for metal cutting machinery, basically inflation for machine tools. Now, if we look at the difference between the average order value and the level of inflation, we can explain that with increased demand for automation. And if you look back over time, there are other periods where there's a good divergence between the two. These are periods when what's now a ubiquitous technology was just starting to be introduced and demanded more and more. So think of something like an automatic tool changer. It used to be a piece of automation that were added to milling machines. As they became more and more commonplace, economies of scale came into place, prices normalized, and it just became a part of the machinery rather than added automation. I think a lot of that's happening right now too, is that more and more people are demanding pieces of technology to augment their labor force. And I know a big misconception of automation is that it replaces labor, but it actually really augments it. If you look at the manufacturing employment right now in the United States, the COVID recession of 2020 was the first recession since 1979 that manufacturing employment was higher after the recession than it was before. However, that employment has started to really plateau a little bit. And I know a lot of people would start to blame automation, say, the robots are taking our jobs. But I think it has a lot more to do with demographic and educational issues. You can't really snap your fingers and have more 18 to 65-year-olds. And you can't snap your fingers again and make all of those 18 to 65-year-olds trained to work on a modern factory floor. A lot of what's happening right now is that there aren't enough employees to cover the positions available. On top of that, I was reading a statistic the other day that the average employee now, has 12 jobs throughout their careers. So just doing some rough math saying 22 to 65, that means the average employee has a new job every 3.9 years. So manufacturers are in a constant state of hiring, training, and trying to retain workers. So it really helps to have automation increasing the productivity of the labor force that you currently have. Now, looking at some general trends that are happening right now in manufacturing and why there's such a good time to be in manufacturing. First is reshoring. There are so many more industries in the United States right now that are demanding manufacturing technology that didn't before COVID. I think a lot of manufacturers realized the value of having shorter or more redundant supply chains. Next is government investment, both through massive spending bills that have incentives for manufacturing as well as military spending, and then also some private investment. There's been massive investment in construction spending for manufacturing facilities, as well as a lot of data centers cropping up, both demanding technology to fill them, as well as augmenting power grids and transmission lines to serve them. Now, combining all of these trends together, we can look at what's likely to be happening with manufacturing technology orders. We work with our friends at Oxford Economics to put together a machinery forecast, and S&P Global Market Intelligence to put together our cutting tool forecast. 2024 is looking to shape up to be about 5.7% down. Now, through July of this year, we're down 10.5%. So that's indicating that the second half of the year is really going to pick up. And that momentum is going to carry us into 2025. Now, 2025 is projected to be up 23%. And in all honesty, I kind of rolled my eyes when I saw that for the first time. But the more that I looked at the underlying reasoning, all of the trends that I just mentioned, in addition to the typical buying patterns and the shape of the data, it's beginning to make a lot more sense that 2025 is going to be a really big year for manufacturing technology. Now, I'm coming right up on the time, I believe. I'd love to chat more, but I know everybody's eager to figure out, where can you learn more? We put out a press release the second Monday of every month. It covers high-level machinery orders, what industries are buying, and some general economic trends that are affecting machinery orders and manufacturing in general. In addition, we have our MT Forecast Conference, October 9 to 11 in Schaumburg. It's a great event. QR code will take you to more information. We'll have economists speaking on the general direction, as well as industry-specific outlooks for automotive sector, aerospace sector, all of the major customer components. I think I'm at time, but here is my contact information. I'll be back a little bit later for the panel discussion. And if we have time, I will take any questions you might have.
Okay, I think we don't have time right now, but let's hold off and maybe during the panel discussion we can. So
I look forward to it.
Yeah. No, I really your discussion I found it very insightful. Trends I had never seen before. So thank you, Chris. I've looked forward to starting to check out your monthly online reports. I didn't know that you guys did those, so that's fantastic. All right, so up next, I have the pleasure of introducing Janine Kunz. She's the Chief Workforce Development Officer at SME. She's a recognized leader in the workforce development area, and today she's going to be exploring the emerging technologies and innovations that are shaping our manufacturing industry in 2024 and beyond. So, Janine, I guess question for you. How do you see emerging technologies like AI, robotics, and additive manufacturing transforming the workforce?
Yeah, great. And thank you. And nice job to my colleague, Chris. It's always good to hear what AMT is reporting out. So thank you for that. And regarding your question and how do we see some of these new, Chris talked about IMTS. I was one of the people privileged to be there, and quite a bit of technology that you just talked about in terms of how is it shaping manufacturing. We can see how it shapes our manufacturing operations. I think that's the clear line that a lot of us can picture. How does technology come and enter our manufacturing place? But sometimes we don't think, how does that affect our people and our workforce, which is a great question. And it affects it in a couple ways. One, certainly the adoption of new technology, especially if it's disruptive and new versus an enhancement to a process we've been doing for a long time, let's say like machining or welding, that certainly requires skills development. But when you take something that's maybe brand new to a manufacturing operation, like additive manufacturing, or now maybe AI is being brought into the manufacturing operations, starts to change the kinds of skill sets and sometimes complete roles that are needed within an organization. So we certainly see it change the inside of manufacturing. Then it changes the profile of the jobs and the skills that are needed. But with it, it also changes kind of who you can look to recruit. So if we think of AI as an example, right, it's going to be heavy data. You're talking about some coding elements, you're talking about analysis, you're talking about programmatic logic, as well as many other aspects and skills when you think about utilizing AI. But when you start to name those skills, it starts to change maybe the profile of individuals that you might be able to tap into to bring and attract into those jobs. So you might get more computer science, you might get some researchers that can start to fill those roles. And that's one element. The other element just to touch on is how technologies like AI can also be used not only in manufacturing, but how they can be used in workforce. So what I mean by that is we see a lot of use, and we're starting to do this ourselves, of how AI can assist in attracting and recruitment and onboarding. We have a program that we launched, and we worked with one of our partners, customers, and a company, and we programmed with them to try to answer questions for individuals as they were being recruited or onboarded into their organization. And they solicited 3,000 questions through this AI bot. We're able to answer automatically 40% of the questions. And we created 13 new knowledge-based algorithms to understand how to improve that AI process. And you may say, well, how does that really affect, individuals and workers? Well, one, it certainly saves some time for their HR department. It made it more efficient process for the individuals. And it also demonstrated how technology is part of our culture of learning, right? And getting a more data literate workforce. So lots of things I could kind of dive into and how AI itself as one technology impacts manufacturing operations, but also impacts the process of workforce in terms of attracting, developing, and retaining employees, but also ultimately how it also changes the profile of our workers.
Absolutely. So I guess you mentioned the skills gap. So I know for us, where I work, it's always a significant concern. So what innovative approaches or programs is SME implementing to address those workforce challenges?
Yeah, no, so great. So yes, I better kind of live up to what I just said about using technologies and doing different things. So one of the things I probably failed to mention, but I've been with SME and a proud member of SME, but I've been with the organization for a couple of decades, and I get the privilege of leading our workforce, everything to do with training, education, workforce development at SME. And part of what we try to do is be as innovative as possible. Because if you listen to Chris, and I don't think there's a person on the call that doesn't see the pain that we all are faced related to workforce challenges. So how are we addressing that to what can SME do? We've done a number of things, but I'll call a couple out. One is related to AI, and think of it of almost like a skillifying your workforce. So working with a company and an individual, we're testing out using AI to translate what, let's say, Janine's role is. A lot of times we might submit our resume back in a long time ago, might have been an email that we've sent in, and all my competencies, my skills, and my background are just tucked away in this document. Maybe now they're automatically through some kind of recruiting agency. But how later does the world of SME look at Janine and understand what skills I maybe brought to my role prior to being with SME? And so I'll use an example in manufacturing and say, maybe I'm a quality engineer or quality manager at a manufacturing company, but maybe I spent 10 years as an electrical engineer. But if that's not known to the employer because they only know me as a quality manager, how do we get access to understanding the landscape of our workforce? Because if we think about what Chris talked about, we're always looking for new people, we're trying to fill jobs. Sometimes those people are sitting within our organization. Transformation requires people to change jobs, move around, have mobility, upskill. But sometimes for an organization to really have optics and transparency to what it has within an organization, that's not always easy. We're not going to go back to all those old resumes and look up to see someone was an electrical engineer before. So what we're trying to do is use AI to translate all that rich data on our individuals within our current workforce to really understand what we actually have, what's within our employment base, what are we missing, what do we have, and how do we tap into some of those skills in different ways as we require them. Conversely, what it allows for the individual is it now becomes almost my skills DNA within my company for me to not only understand and know that my company has a record of my abilities, so they can look for me maybe in within the sea of employees to see that I am an electrical engineer and I could be tapped into for maybe a new role. But it also allows me to use this digital framework, of my DNA and my skills to bump up against new roles and have a very automated way of measuring where my gaps are in terms of competencies against my existing profile to the profiles of new emerging roles, and then create a roadmap for me again, ideal state in a digital way that gives me an idea of what's the personalized development plan for me to get to a new job or role that I may be interested in. So those are some examples or ways. Another element of what we've done is we just launched at actually IMTS. So thank you for Chris for the great event. We launched a program called Ready for Hire. And it's an innovative way for employers to gain access into a talent pool very differently and than maybe historically or some of the other search organizations have provided by capitalizing on some richness within our partner, which is within Cengage, as well as with SME. So this program is working with employers to identify certain entry-level positions that they're looking for, and then tap into this Ready for Hire program where we go back with our partners, we identify individuals in the database, we work with those individuals to assess them against those skills that are needed. We actually train them, certify them, and help onboard them for the company. So we're trying to take some of the failure modes and barriers that organizations are seeing and experiencing and try to do some new innovative, bold ways of addressing some of those challenges.
What that sounds fantastic. Very impressive. I'd love to learn more about that actually. Myself. So I guess one more question for you.
Sure.
So how is SME addressing the diversity and inclusion perspective within the workforce initiatives? Do you see these having any impact on how we're driving into the industry's innovation capacity perspective?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. One of our goals is that we aim to achieve, and I believe we all see this within our manufacturing environments. And Chris again touched on it about, right, this is a tight labor pool, right? We got to be creative and inclusive. Our goal is to have our manufacturing workforce be reflective of our nation's people, and right now it's not, and I think we all know that. So there's a lot of opportunity. And the second part of your question was, does it help our innovation capacity? Believe absolutely. I personally believe that. I believe our organization believes that is diversity of thought, right? And bringing new perspectives, new individuals, creating that more inclusive and diverse environment. By nature, there's lots of studies that indicate the results of having diversity of thought for innovation, creativity, teamwork, collaboration. And also then even without working within your constituents, your customer base, your suppliers, it creates just a better mechanism for doing those things in terms of outreach beyond your four walls. But some of the things we're doing, we launched a program earlier this year called the Manufacturing Imperative Workforce Pipeline Challenge. So that is in about 17 states with about 25 community colleges that have signed up with innovative, bold objectives to increase our pipeline across these colleges per college of 1,000 net new entrants into these college programs per year for 3 years, which ends up equaling 75,000 new individuals. And the cornerstone, one of the pillars of that program, there's many aspects of it, but one of the cornerstones is diversity and inclusion into these enrollment of these programs in the colleges, which ultimately are leading to jobs in manufacturing. And so we have worked with these colleges and launching some key sector strategies within their communities to tap into underrepresented populations. These colleges are also very bullish on their belief in the importance of that. And so we're working with them to identify historically resilient populations, your veterans, your females that are not represented enough in manufacturing, minority populations, some justice involved. and looking at, again, ways to not only work with them to get individuals different profiles into our programs within our colleges, but also help our employers understand what it's like. Let's use myself as a female entering the workforce. If that's not a population, and a business has had a large population of women, is looking at how maybe their enrollment, their hiring practices, even their marketing materials, their onboarding is also inclusive of having females in the workforce. So a lot of aspects that I think go into the mechanics of making that happen, but certainly SME is and doing what it can, along with many other organizations out in the manufacturing industry. It's great to see how many people are embracing the importance of diversifying our workforce in manufacturing.
No, I agree. And, I love to hear that you guys are going beyond just addressing, hey, we just want the population to learn the skills. You're really addressing I'll say the above the shop floor aspects. It's the HR, it's the communication, it's the marketing materials. It really is beyond just, I want to teach her or him how to use a wrench. Because it really needs to be multifaceted. So that's fantastic. I'm happy to hear you guys are going down that road. Makes me happy to see.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Janine. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Wonderful to hear. So now I'd like to introduce Jeff Applegate. He is a seasoned leader in the manufacturing industry. If you haven't heard him speak before, he's going to provide us a C-suite perspective, discussing the challenges and opportunities also, obviously, that he's seen in the business arena and is currently facing, actually, and how he's strategically navigate those types of issues. So welcome, Jeff. I guess to start with, from your perspective as a C-suite leader, what do you see as the most pressing challenges that companies are tending to face today in manufacturing landscapes?
I think that we have a tendency to think that the obvious ones that you hear all the time is inflation, supply shortages, interest rates, or workforce issues. And those are all issues that we face, or really symptoms of, I think, maybe some deeper problems. But from a skilled worker standpoint, I think not only is our company in the injection molding industry, we use tool and die makers, we use plastic process technicians, we have pretty sophisticated industrial maintenance technicians that we need, and trying to find those skilled workers is tough. And what we find that when I go visit the schools, whether it be the universities, the trade schools, or when I go visit high schools and the technical departments of the high schools that are teaching these trades, what I find is that a lot of the educators need to be educated as to what skills that these students need. And so we've been trying to bring these educators over here to our facility and to train them. So, skilled workers is a problem for us, attracting those and getting the right training for them. We do a lot of our own internal training, but having a workforce that we can go tap in that's just readily available is just not there. I think another thing we see is that the workers, we see a lot of lack of direction. And it seems to be, when you look at our nation, you look at the last few generations where, this is somewhat of a philosophy that we see the decentralization of, families aren't together as much. So they've moved to different cities. So you don't have the aunts and uncles and grandparents and community to support the family. And then you've got, a lot of single household families. And I think that what we're seeing is that these kids, a lot of them, the younger workforce that are coming in, they just don't have the same direction. They don't they don't have the commitment. They don't have the motivation, the ambition to really have a vision for what they want in their careers. And consequently, that's why you end up with these folks that we have a lot of turnover. And so they really don't know what they want to do. They really don't have a good support system. And so we spend a lot of time mentoring and trying to support these folks and give them a vision for what they can accomplish and try to develop them along the way. So that's a challenge for us. I think, we all have been on the other side of bad government policy. We in manufacturing, we're faced with a lot of regulations. It seems like every day there's new regulations coming out that ask us to do things that really are nonsensical. So I do have bad government policy that we deal with. And I think with maybe if I'm a middle market company, we got a couple hundred employees. So I don't have lots of teams to go and address all the policies and the documentation that we need. So that's been a challenge for us. The R&D, this is maybe it's Section 174 research and development really has been a huge tax increase for manufacturing. So we've been dealing with that recently and trying to catch up on that and understand that. We also have let some of the incentives to buy capital equipment. There is an incentive where we could depreciate 100% of that capital equipment in the first year. That went to 80%, now to 60%. So those are sunsetting, I guess, tax breaks, but those are really incentives for us to invest in capital equipment. So we're seeing those go away. So that makes the equipment buying decisions. It influences those. Last thing I'd mention as a challenge is, and probably all experiences, is this our dependence on the internet and the security of the internet. We have had, constantly having, cyber attacks on our network. We have, we're working with Bank of America, and they have a lot of security in their systems, but it's weekly that we're facing people that are either washing checks or just the general hacking. So I think that's a big problem as we continue to be more and more dependent on the internet, which is appropriate, and there's so many efficiencies, but the security is a big challenge.
I totally understand. So I guess we've talked about the challenges. So what about the opportunities for growth now in your business? How are you positioning your company to capitalize on those? And, what are those opportunities? How are you, and I guess even more specifically, how are you fostering opportunities for innovation to stay competitive? Injection molding, some folks think, oh, it's been around for a long time. It's like I've cut my teeth in the injection molding industry. So it is definitely a evolving industry, and a lot of technology is still growing. So how are you staying competitive in that area?
Well, I think the investment in automation is everybody in our industry is having to do that to compete with. Where you have a lot of labor-intensive operations, we start with the basics. Where on an injection molding machine, if you go to the basic, you're shooting a part and you have to open the door, the operator pulls the part out. The first level of automation is just not, keeping the door shut, and so that the machine cycles on a repeatable time cycle. You're not interrupting the cycle with the operator. Your quality increases. So that's the really basic stuff, but we do most of the things that we do have automation, whether it be printing, mechanical assembly, welded components, labeling, machining operations that we're doing after the molding process. So we're doing much of those in line, and so investing in automation is how we're trying to eliminate some of the labor. But at the same time, I think that the point Chris was making is that you're requiring higher skilled jobs. So what we're doing is as we train these folks, we're also giving them better opportunities because they're making higher wages. So instead of one operator working at one machine, we got one operator working at 4 machines, or they're doing multiple operations at that machine, requiring more skills. And so the wages are going up, and so that's, I think, a good thing. I've always felt like, as far as creating opportunity, that if you give good quality, it doesn't matter how crowded the marketplace. If you have a good quality, fair price, and give good service, there's plenty of room in there, and we've certainly created that. We've seen, I was in Mexico 2 weeks ago, and I'd say we're seeing opportunity, call it North American opportunity, but companies moving to North America. And what I've seen on good government policy is I was in Leon, Mexico, and they had created a free trade zone. They built educational institutions. They have built roads and railroads and all the many global automotive companies have moved in. General Motors, Volkswagen, a lot of the Chinese automotive manufacturers. And to see the modern facility, brand new airport, seeing the trade, seeing the service businesses growing around it, it was really quite fascinating. Having done business in Mexico for a number of years in the 90s, and then going back and seeing where this good government policy has created an entire industry. I think there's some opportunities there. The nearshoring or reshoring, we're seeing some of that opportunities where people see the geopolitical issues in China, and so we've had 2 or 3 pretty significant programs that have moved back to the United States, and there's been others that are just trying to be more regional, where they recognize the freight cost, and they have tried to centralize their manufacturing closer to or their suppliers closer to where they're manufacturing. So we've seen some of our newer customers coming that were in our backyard that may have been buying from other states. So that's kind of where we're seeing some growth opportunities. We're really busy, and we really have a strong pipeline and a lot of good programs for the coming years. So I'm extremely optimistic for the manufacturing business.
That's fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that. It's always good when our suppliers have optimism about how things are looking in the future. So thank you, Jeff. We have some time now for some questions from the audience. I'd like to invite all of our panelists back if you'd like to turn on your cameras. And I'd like the audience, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, to go ahead and type them into the chat box. And I actually have a question, Jeff, that you had brought up, and I'd like to kind of pose it to Chris. Jeff had mentioned the capital depreciation, I guess, benefit that a lot of the manufacturers had seen related to capital. Have you seen any impact on that in any of the analyses that your group had done on the amount of capital that had been bought? Had you been able to see anything?
Absolutely. So we saw 2 kind of major trends with that. In 2022 was one of the first decreases. There wasn't much of a bump toward the end of the year, but talking to a lot of suppliers, they were saying they already took so many orders, they were busy trying to deliver, so they weren't really promoting it as much. At the end of last year, 2023, we did see a big uptick in order activity. And a lot of the manufacturers were saying, yes, we were promoting this, telling our customers. A lot of this order activity was people trying to take advantage of this.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Janine, I got a question for you, and it's related to Chris's presentation. Do you think, from Chris's presentation, he highlighted, potential growth areas in the manufacturing sector over the next few years? How do you think those will impact our workforce needs? You mentioned additive manufacturing, but what about some of the other areas? What technology areas do you think will really the industry is going to need to focus on outside of additive?
Yeah, and certainly, and Chris, feel free to chime in if you have additional thoughts after. And I spoke about AI. We're seeing a lot, right? Data analysis, data analytics, data science, data. I think Jeff also brought up, right, with all the connections, the cyber, right? There's a lot of discussions around cybersecurity and the need to have that kind of skill set within your organization and thoughtfulness. When we started talking about connecting machines, right, connecting supply chains, right, that all becomes very, very critical. So I think there's quite a bit in that sphere. But I'd be remiss, earlier this morning, I did a small interview on the side with someone who was asking about reshoring, and obviously we know the CHIPS and Science Act and all the importance of what happened, and Chris talked about those investments. That is very important. It has a whole different skill set and actually creates an entire infrastructure that's needed inside of our school system too. We didn't have a lot of that fabrication kind of capabilities within our education system. You're talking a lot of times about, right, very clean spaces where people are having to put on what they call like the bunny suits, right? There's a whole cadre of movement that not only is for people, I'll call it just out in the workforce, but that whole system of education that prepares people for jobs. And within the United States, that wasn't one of our strengths. That's why we brought it back, right? That's why the CHIPS and Science Act happened. But with that put a lot of pressure for those kinds of jobs to become part of our fabric of the United States. We also needed to make sure it was part of the fabric of the education system. Some of the other movement that I don't remember if Chris brought up, but electrification of vehicles, battery manufacturing, that's also, we're seeing that. Certainly SMEs, we're in Motor City, it's where our headquarters are. So we certainly know that, and it's not just Michigan, we know that automotive is prevalent throughout many parts of the United States. But that, puts a lot of pressures on, again, the skills and the kinds of talent and the things that are required. So those are a couple, but Chris, I'm sure you look at this very much from a technology standpoint. We see it, in my role at least, how it affects the workforce.
Absolutely. And another trend, I kind of glossed over it in my presentation, is it's kind of concentrated in aerospace and shipbuilding, but military investments. I feel like every day I open my laptop and it's, the Pentagon spent $1 billion on this, $1 billion on that. Even foreign governments are buying a lot more military technology from us. And every time I see one of those headlines, I think back, I can't remember if it was the New York Times or Washington Post, but there was a headline one time and it just stuck with me. It says, yes, we can afford a bigger military, but who's going to build it? So I think all of those investments, while yes, they're very important, they're also drawing away from every other sector. There was another article I read recently about all of these training programs to get welders, metal workers into shipyards to start building ships. So I think that's another big sector that is going to be demanding a lot of labor in the future.
Agreed. Yeah, no, we hear that in the defense industry, absolutely, that the shipyards they're dying for skilled labor, and they're not sure how to handle it. So absolutely. We do have a few questions in the chat. I guess, Chris, for you, right off the top of your head, is there any metric to track depreciation versus tooling machinery orders? KPI off the top of your head. If not, you can maybe answer it offline, but
it'll be a very long explanation. So short answer, not really. There's a couple ways to estimate it, but I won't take up everybody's time going into all the nerdy details in math.
Okay, so BK, offline, we'll figure that out for you. Good question though, because we have questions like that all the time. Okay, Carlos asked for Janine, how do you see the trending from a traditional training program to the new formats of training? Whether it be AR, that type of thing. We need that speed to market even in that skills development, correct? Because we can't take a year to develop that program, and we got to do it quickly. And especially when industries are sensitive and open to those new training models. So how can we do things like that?
Yeah. And thank you. It's a great question. Certainly something we see a lot of. That's kind of the area we do quite a bit of ourselves. And we're constantly having to, challenge ourselves to how do we do things differently. I mentioned those 25 colleges that not only are they looking at bold and innovative ways of attracting new students, they're looking at bold and innovative ways of trying to, look at how, what they're doing within their classrooms and their constructs, both in the for credit and the non-credit side. But with that, we all know it's difficult to meet, right? You might not be able to do the program that a college might offer. So we need to kind of have multiple ways to develop our workforce, and many of the examples, including what Chris talked about with our military and the shipyards. So what we do is we have certainly the traditional instructor-led, right, hands-on. Many years ago, we launched, e-learning, right, digital assets, right, so that you can have that kind of anytime, anywhere. It allows people for English as a second language. They don't have to worry about being in a classroom and kind of saying, "Can you repeat that, Chris?" Or they can kind of do the class at their pace. They can kind of redo it maybe another time. There's a lot of benefits. People who might be on an education program like an EIP within their school, right? Those are another ways that those kinds of tools can be leveraged using technology and learning. But you mentioned, Tara, virtual reality. So recently we launched kind of virtual labs using that immersive, put the Oculus glasses on. And the idea was, well, you can do a lot with e-learning. It's not a hands-on, experience, nor is a virtual lab that gets you one step closer to practicing what you might have learned in a classroom setting, or in a traditional classroom setting, not on a machine, as well as an e-learning class. So take that knowledge, and we call it practice, and then go perform, right? So now maybe in an instance where you don't have access to equipment, or maybe there's a safety issue or a cost issue, whatever it might be, you're able to utilize virtual labs as a way of getting yourself just that much closer to a competency, so that when the employer, you're onboarding the new employee, you can maybe then go and step into the plant environment, get on a machine a little faster. So it's allowing that more scalability, a little bit more flexibility in terms of your own learning style, as well as reporting, right? So we have an instance where the student kind of told their teacher, like, this class didn't really work for me. Well, they call us and we're like, well, the student was in the class for about 40 seconds, So I don't know that was the issue. It might have been, so we all don't love big data, but sometimes data can be powerful in helping you understand that, but also helping you see where maybe people struggled. So in the virtual lab environment, you can actually track a ton of data and really start to understand people's movements, what they did, and kind of, again, learn how people are learning, but also see maybe how you can improve the training efforts to be more impactful. And so, yeah, there's lots of things, but it's never, it's a continuous improvement, just like our manufacturers. It's the same thing in workforce.
Yeah, no, it's great that everyone embraces that concept. It's not just the manufacturing world. Well, we're almost at time. I want to thank our panel. It was fantastic. I'm so happy I got to spend this hour with you. So as we move forward, remember the importance of staying informed and being adaptable. I know all of us realize the importance of that. Our manufacturing landscape is rapidly evolving, whether it's cyber or the technology or just the workforce in general. Understand the trends and prepare for our challenges. We need to seize our opportunities that lie ahead. Since it's a Members Appreciation Week, we want to especially recognize the contributions of each of you that have made us what it is, and the industry at large. Your dedication and the engagement is what makes a difference. So we're excited to continue to grow together. Be sure to take advantage of the special events that we have lined up this week. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again at future SME events, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye, everyone.